Okay, I want to start with an image. An image that I think most of us are, well, maybe even a little painfully familiar with.
I think I know what you're getting at.
You know the drill, right? The ringing bell,
Yep.
the rows of desks all facing forward, the teacher up at the front dispensing facts, and 30 kids just trying to cram it all in for a test on Friday.
The classic industrial model, the educational factory.
Exactly, the educational factory. And look, we've all heard the critique that schools were built to churn out factory workers like Ford turned out Model Ts.
Sure.
But here's where I want to push past the usual talking points. That model, it didn't just, disappear because we bought a bunch of iPads.
Oh, no. In many ways, it just got a software update.
And that is the tension we're looking at today. We're assuming the factory is dead just because we have the internet, but today's deep dive suggests we might be building a much more efficient, maybe a much more dangerous factory.
Just in the cloud. It's a terrifying thought, but a really necessary one.
It really is.
We're looking at a paper that just dropped October 2025. It was just presented this month in Paris. It's titled Pedagog-Ia, Study and Reflections on the Critical and Ethical Use of NTICEA and Artificial Intelligence.
And before you tune out, because of all the acronyms, this is not some dry technical manual from Silicon Valley. This is a manifesto.
It really is.
And it's coming out of Michoacan, Mexico. It's written by Juan Manuel Tapia Diaz, and he's framing AI in education not as a tech support issue, but as a battle for sovereignty.
That word sovereignty is doing so much heavy lifting here. Tapia Diaz is basically arguing that we're at a crossroads.
A huge one.
We can either use AI to domesticate students more efficiently than the old factory ever could, or we can use it for emancipation.
Domestication versus emancipation, I mean, that is a heavy binary. But let's back up for a second to get the context.
Okay.
The paper argues that our current school system is struggling, really struggling, to keep up with what it calls the fourth industrial revolution.
And you have to look at the history here. The first two revolutions were all about muscle.
Right, steam engines, electricity.
It replaced physical effort. And the school system was designed to support exactly that.
Yeah.
It was about literacy, sure, but it was specifically about creating a workforce that could follow instructions, read a manual.
And not ask too many questions.
Don't ask questions.
Yeah.
It was about compliance. You don't want a creative free thinker on an assembly line. You want someone who tightens the bolt when the bell rings.
Precisely.
But the revolution we are in now, in 2026, it isn't replacing muscle. It's blending the physical and the virtual. And that creates what the author calls philosophical, ethical, and legal paradoxes.
The line between what's real and what's artificial is just, it's blurring.
It's completely blurring.
And the old school model, the one designed for steam engines, is trying to run on algorithms. The paper says the system has aged. It's like trying to run the latest neural network on a Commodore 64.
It creates this massive friction. The goal of education can't be technical specialization anymore, or just memorizing data.
The machine does that better than we do now.
So much better. The new goal has to be developing our human capabilities. Critical thinking, empathy, collaboration. The things the machine can't do.
But, and this is a huge but, we can't just say, let's teach empathy and then hand every kid a tablet and just walk away. The paper has a term for that.
False digital inclusion.
Exactly. Tell us what that is.
It's a critical concept. False digital inclusion is when you equip a school with all the gadgets, but you don't change the pedagogy.
You're just digitizing the old factory.
That's it. You're using a supercomputer to do the same rote memorization you used to do with a pencil.
And this isn't just a theoretical problem, right? This is the reality on the ground in Michoacan. The paper paints a really, really stark picture of the inequality there.
Oh, it's stark. We're not talking about schools deciding which VR headset to buy.
Not even close.
Not at all. We are talking about the 2023-2024 school cycle. In Michoacan alone, there are over 2,100 multi-grade schools.
And for anyone who hasn't seen one, that means one teacher in a single room, trying to teach first graders how to read while at the same time teaching sixth graders algebra.
And mostly in rural areas. The infrastructure is just. It's non-existent. The source notes that the vast majority of these schools lack computer equipment, tablets, or even broadband internet.
So this is what the author calls geoeducation, right? The idea that where you live determines your reality so completely that you basically become invisible to the system.
Educational invisibilization. It's a vicious cycle. You get policymakers in the capital saying, oh, we'll do a Zoom training for the teachers on AI.
But out in these rural communities,
The connection drops every 10 minutes, or the teachers just refuse because These digital tools have failed them so many times before.
Right. The paper brings up the ghosts of these past projects. Encyclopedia in the 2000s, Mexico Connected in 2013.
Mexico Connected is such a tragic example. The goal was free broadband for public sites, but the paper notes that something like 47% of those sites eventually got disconnected.
Nearly half. That's a staggering failure rate.
It failed because of the soil, lack of maintenance, equipment gets stolen, bad local connectivity. You can't just drop a high-tech seed into soil that hasn't been prepared and expect a harvest.
That analogy, the seed and the soil, that feels so central to this whole thing. If the soil is the community and the infrastructure and the seed is the AI.
We're just tossing seeds onto concrete.
We are. So how does Tapia Diaz propose we fix the soil? This brings us to that core concept, Pedagog-Ia.
It's such a clever play on words. Pedagogy plus IA intelligentsia artificial.
Yeah.
But it's more than just a pun.
There's a whole framework.
A framework for a critical pedagogy of AI.
Yeah.
And to really get it, you have to understand the influence of Paulo Freire.
The Brazilian philosopher. I remember reading Pedagogy of the Oppressed in college. It changed how I viewed everything.
It usually does. Freire is the absolute backbone of this proposal. The paper cites a quote of his that's just perfect. All development is modernization, but not all modernization is development.
I want to just sit with that for a second. We tend to think newer is better. If we have AI, that must mean we've progressed.
But Freire, and by extension Tapia Diaz, are saying that just because you have modern tools, that does not mean you have human development.
Right. Freire famously criticized the banking model of education. This idea that a student's mind is an empty bank account, and the teacher's job is just to deposit knowledge into it.
And if you think about it, AI is the ultimate banking model. It is the biggest repository of facts in human history. The temptation to just use it to deposit answers into students' heads must be overwhelming.
And that's the domestication the author warns about. If we use AI to just give students the answers, to summarize the text for them, to write their essay, to solve the equation, we are domesticating them.
We are training them to be passive consumers of information.
So Pedagog-Ia is the counter-proposal. It wants to use AI for emancipation. But what does that actually look like? I mean, how do you use a machine that knows everything to teach people how to think for themselves?
You have to shift the role of the teacher and the student. The paper argues that we need to move to what it calls learning communities. The teacher isn't the sage on the stage anymore.
They become a co-designer.
A co-designer. That implies they're building something with the student, not just talking at them.
Okay.
They are. The proposal suggests using AI as an intelligent tutoring system, or IETS. This creates a zone of proximal development. That's a Vygotsky concept, where the AI provides the scaffolding, the support.
That allows a student to reach higher than they could on their own.
Exactly.
So the AI isn't doing the work for them. It's like the spotter in the gym. It helps them lift the heavier weight, but the student still has to do the actual lifting.
That's a perfect way to put it. The AI provides 24/7 personalized support, answering specific questions, offering new angles. But the synthesis, the actual construction of knowledge, that happens in the community, guided by the teacher.
But, and there's always a but, with this tech, using AI as a spotter isn't risk-free. And this is where the paper takes this really interesting turn into neuroscience.
It's not just about social theory, it's about biology.
This section was fascinating to me. It breaks down the whole neurotechnological impact. On one hand, yes, AI can stimulate the prefrontal cortex, the CEO of the brain. It can present these complex, multidimensional problems that force the brain to make new neural connections.
That's the emancipation side. Better thinking, more creativity.
But on the other hand, you have the dark side. And it all starts with the dopamine loops.
The immediate reward, the little hit.
Exactly. The paper links interaction with AI and screens to the mesolimbic dopaminergic circuits. It's the very same pathway as behavioral addiction.
When you ask a chatbot a question and get an instant, perfect answer,
That's a dopamine hit.
it feels like magic. And if you get that hit every single time you feel a moment of confusion or struggle, why would you ever struggle again?
You wouldn't. And that leads to the degradation of brain plasticity. Plasticity is the brain's ability to rewire itself based on effort and experience. The paper warns about what it calls algorithmic automations. Meaning, if the AI does all the summarizing, structuring, and problem solving,
Your brain just stops making those efforts.
it's literally use it or lose it. If we outsource our cognitive heavy lifting to the cloud, our own mental muscles atrophy.
And it's compounded by stress. The paper talks about digital anxiety. The constant hyperconnectivity triggers the sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight.
It raises cortisol levels.
All the time, which explains the burnout that teachers and students are feeling. You can't learn anything when you're in survival mode.
And you can't sleep. The blue light inhibits melatonin, so you end up with a population that is addicted to dopamine, stressed out by cortisol, and completely sleep-deprived. It's a recipe for cognitive disaster.
A total disaster.
The paper uses two terms that I think just perfectly define our modern social life: nomophobia and phubbing.
Yes.
Nomophobia is that panic you feel when you can't find your phone. We've all been there. But phubbing, I feel like I see this every single time I go out to a restaurant.
Phone snubbing. Ignoring the person right in front of you for the screen in your hand.
It just destroys the social fabric that is essential for those learning communities you were just talking about.
You can't have a free-in community of practice if everyone is phubbing each other.
There's one more neurological concept the paper highlights that I found really counterintuitive. It's called the default mode network. And usually, when we hear default mode, we think of being lazy, but the author says we actually need it.
Desperately. The default mode network is what's active during mental wandering.
Daydreaming.
Disconnection. It's when the brain consolidates learning and makes those weird creative leaps.
It's the shower thought phenomenon. You get your best ideas when you aren't actively trying to think.
Exactly. But if we are constantly plugged in, constantly getting algorithmic suggestions, we never enter default mode. The paper argues that these suggestions homogenize the creative process.
So if we all use the same AI to generate ideas and we never disconnect to let our own brains wander,
we all end up thinking the same things.
Which brings us right back to that word, sovereignty. Because if we're all thinking the same things suggested by an algorithm owned by a corporation in another country, we've lost something absolutely fundamental.
And this is where Michoacan's stance becomes so powerful. They aren't just trying to catch up to the U.S. or Europe. They're trying to establish educational sovereignty.
So what does that look like in practice? Because it's easy to say we want sovereignty, but it's a lot harder to do when you still need the software.
It means adapting the technology to their culture, not the other way around. The whole implementation strategy involves what they call situational learning.
Which means learning in communities.
In communities of practice. So instead of a top-down mandate where every kid sits alone with a laptop, they're organizing face-to-face workshops.
Okay, so the human element is front and center.
Yes. The paper mentions workshops like educational co-design assisted by generative AI. But notice that phrasing. Assisted by. The humans are still the designers. The goal is for teachers, even the older generation who might be resistant, to come together and decide how this tool serves their specific community projects.
It reminds me of the Chromebooks delivery program mentioned in the text. It wasn't just a delivery service dropping off boxes.
No, it was paired with this training to make sure the device didn't just become a paperweight or worse, a distraction machine.
It's all about rejecting homogenization. If a rural school in Michoacan uses AI in exactly the same way a private school in Palo Alto does, the specific needs, the culture, the language of Michoacan just gets erased.
Sovereignty means they decide the inputs and the outputs.
It's a very bold stance. The paper describes this whole project as a courageous bet.
It is. It walks a very, very fine line. It rejects technophobia, the fear that all tech is bad. But it also rejects uncritical technophilia, the naive belief that tech is going to save us.
It's the middle path, critical adoption.
And that's the takeaway for anyone listening, really. Whether you're in education or not, the paper asks us to ensure that the future isn't determined by machines, but by how humans use machines to improve their communities.
I just keep coming back to that seed and soil analogy. It's haunting me a little bit.
It should. It poses the ultimate question.
Right. We spend billions and billions of dollars developing better seeds, faster chips, smarter models, more immersive apps, but we spend almost nothing on the soil.
The social connection, the infrastructure, the human capability to actually handle this stuff.
And if you plant a genetically modified super seed in toxic soil, you don't get a super crop.
You get nothing. Or worse, you get an invasive species that destroys the entire ecosystem.
So the challenge from Juan Manuel Tapia Diaz is this. Look at your own soil. Look at your own digital sovereignty. Are you cultivating your own mind, your own community, your own default mode silence?
Or are you just another node in the factory, processing data for the algorithm? Are you emancipating yourself or are you being domesticated?
That is the question we are going to leave you with today. It's been a heavy one, but I think a really necessary one. Big thanks to the listener who suggested this paper. It is a gem.
A pleasure to unpack it.
We will see you all on the next deep dive. Just keep
Coming
thinking. Back to that seed and soil analogy, it's haunting me a little bit.
It should. It poses the ultimate question.
Right. We spend billions and billions of dollars developing better seeds, faster chips, smarter models, more immersive apps, but we spend almost nothing on the soil.
The social connection, the infrastructure, the human capability to actually handle this stuff.
And if you plant a genetically modified super seed in toxic soil, you don't get a super crop.
You get nothing. Or worse, you get an invasive species that destroys the entire ecosystem.
So the challenge from Juan Manuel Tapia Diaz is this. Look at your own soil. Look at your own digital sovereignty. Are you cultivating your own mind, your own community, your own default mode silence?
Or are you just another node in the factory, processing data for the algorithm? Are you emancipating yourself, or are you being domesticated?
That is the question we are going to leave you with today. It's been a heavy one, but I think a really necessary one. Big thanks to the listener who suggested this paper. It is a gem.
A pleasure to unpack it.
We will see you all on the next deep dive. Keep thinking.